Hello, hello, everybody. Good Wednesday evening to you. It is 6 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time here in beautiful Oxnard, California. My name is Paul Carganilla. I'm the Community Affairs Manager for the Oxnard Police Department, and I'm here in the Oxnard Police Department main police station, downtown Oxnard, with Senior Fraud Detective Erica Escalante. Thank you for joining us, Detective Escalante.
Oh, hi, everybody. Um, yes, senior fraud detective. I'm the only fraud detective.
Okay. I wasn't sure how I should address you. I'll just Detective Escalante, I shall call you. As you are fraud you what is your main focus is fraud and scams, correct?
Yes, I investigate all types of fraud. I investigate identity theft, employee embezzlement, elder financial abuse, and along with that, all kinds of scams.
So you're a little bit busy.
Very busy. Yes, just
Just a
all the
tad.
time.
Well, we're going to take some live questions from the audience. I know a lot of people always have a ton of questions about the recent frauds and scams that are so prevalent these days, especially with the internet and with the phone on over the phone and everything like that. But first, I just wanted to spend a few minutes to get to know you. Um, let's talk about your career with the police department. When did you get started? What made you want to become a police officer? How did it all begin?
Oh, sure. I actually started here at the Oxnard Police Department in what we call a civilian job. I worked for what is now known as the IT department, installing the very first personal computers at the police station back in 1995. Um, I did that for 3 years, and then I went to the police academy, and I've been a sworn law enforcement officer or peace officer for the last 22 years now.
Wow. And when did you? How many years were you on? I know, like when you begin your career as a police officer, you start on patrol, and you kind of work your way up. How many years were you on patrol before you started to make different moves career wise?
I worked patrol assignments for about, 10 years. About half my career was in patrol assignments. Um, Besides being a regular patrol officer on the beat, I did 3 years in the high schools. So I still sometimes talk to people who were students back at Pacifica High School in the mid 2000s. I think I was there about 2003 through 2006. I worked at Pacifica and Pacific View and a short stint at Channel Islands High School.
Well, I had no idea you were an SRO. I had no idea you were in IT before you started your career. And I'm finding that it's an interesting pattern. Last week we had traffic officer Sanger on, and he had started in as a TSA, a traffic service assistant. And a few weeks back, we had Detective Crystal Walker on, and she said she had started, I think, in the property division. So it's really interesting to see how these evolve. So when you started in IT, is that what gave you the idea of becoming a police officer, or were you always just kind of interested in the police and law enforcement?
I certainly was not always interested in law enforcement as a career. From high school, where I was athlete, I went to Stanford University. I played women's soccer there and studied Slavic languages and linguistics, if you can believe that. I went overseas and did research projects in Poland. So I went to graduate school for a while and decided the ivory tower was not for me. I wanted to work with real people, and I had a clearly curious mind. I wanted to get into investigations. And in 1995, community policing was just starting on the West Coast. And I was living in Seattle at the time, and I saw the first women bike patrol officers with Seattle Police Department. And that I had, after I retired from playing soccer, I became a cyclist, and I raced bikes, and I won national collegiate medals both at Stanford University and at University of Texas at Austin, where I was a graduate student. So riding a bike outside and investigating things, that looked really cool. I moved back to California and I started applying at law enforcement agencies. And the nice thing about Oxnard Police Department, and I believe it's still true today, is it's a place where you can get your foot in the door doing something here at the police department. Whether it's I actually applied to be a records clerk, but they were installing the first personal computers here. And they thought I would be smart enough to figure out how to do it with my education. So they asked me to do that instead of being a records clerk. And people can still apply here for other jobs, whether it's traffic service assistant, community service officer, or any of our other clerical jobs, just so you can get your foot in the door, see how you like working for the police department, and see if it's for you. It's a great way to decide if that's what you want to do with your life.
It's so true. And it's so many people think that like it's too late in life to get involved in a career in law enforcement. And I like to tell people all the time, like there's so many different things that you can do as a career in law enforcement that's not being a patrol officer or a police officer. And I think I'm a pretty good example of that. I spent a lot of time as a professional entertainer working for Disney, and then I got a job here. I interviewed for records and dispatch at the same time. And dispatch I got through first, so I worked as a dispatcher for 2 years, and now I'm doing something completely different that I just love. I've never had so much fun at work, and just love my job. And so that this message is just really for anybody out there who's considering a job in law enforcement. You don't have to be a patrol officer. There's plenty of different careers that you can find. All great careers for a great department like ours, for sure. But that will just at this time, I want to invite anybody who's at home watching. Hi, Linda, Javier, Bridget, Michelle. If anybody out there has any questions about any scams or any frauds that are going around these days, as I mentioned earlier, just with the internet and with the cell phones now, it's just everywhere. It seems like it's everywhere you look. And is there anything? I'm so excited to have you here because I know there's just no shortage of things we need to be warning people about. So I just want to jump right into that and say, if you're coming here tonight with any specific warnings about anything that's trending or going on right now that we need to know about.
Oh, if I have anything we need to
Yes,
know about?
yes.
Well, I subscribe to the Federal Trade Commission, pretty much all their messaging. I get numerous notifications every single day
And
about.
they're at FTC. If we want to subscribe to that, they're at ftc.gov.
Yes,
Okay.
ftc.gov,
Uh-huh.
Federal Trade Commission. And they're pretty much the nationwide clearinghouse for any kind of scam that's going on. And they keep all the statistics on it, and they keep their finger on the pulse of it. And they do all the civil recoveries on any companies, that real companies that might be doing business in a fraudulent manner, such as like telemarketing. When you get those robocalls, they put a stop to that, and they'll do fines, and they'll do class action lawsuits. So for big data breaches, like when Equifax got hit a couple of years ago, they did the settlement on that, and it closed out in January, but anybody who was part of that data breach, which is pretty much everybody, could sign up to receive $50 or something from the settlement. I haven't got my check yet. Maybe it's in the mail.
So what's going on right now? What's going on today that you're seeing the most?
Well, as far as nationwide trends, COVID-19 has brought a lot of same old scams with a new flavor. Um, the scammers are also working at home, and they're working really hard on their computers and phones, scamming everyone. They're trying to use people's personal information to fraudulently receive funds from the government, such as unemployment from EDD, try to get people's those stimulus checks, tax refunds. Some people filed late and they might be getting late tax refunds. So they'll try to intercept those payments, and that prevents the people who should be receiving them from receiving them or being eligible for unemployment when they're actually going to need it, or other benefits from the government. So that's happening, and that's sort of a crossover between ID theft and scams. So sometimes you get scammers emails, phishing emails, or phone calls where they're really looking for your personal information so they can do those types of frauds. The other types of COVID-19 scams are people asking for money when they shouldn't be, because nobody would ask money for these things, such as, oh, you need to pay us a fee to get your stimulus check or your unemployment or some other fake COVID-19 tests or cures, or preventions or vaccines or anything like that is going to be a scam. Another one that comes up is working from home. Big problem right now. People are unemployed. They're worried that unemployment's going to run out, or they're only working part-time instead of full-time, and they need more money. So work from home scams are huge right now.
How does that work? How does a work from home scam work?
So people are having to look for jobs online because you can't just walk into stores and submit applications right now. And that's kind of been the trend anyway, posting up your resume on different sites or using career-specific sites to advertise yourself for employment. Well, the scammers contact you, which is great. You think you're getting a hit on your resume or something, your profile out there on a job site, but it's a scammer. And of course, you're giving them your personal information because you think it's a job. And then usually they tell you some crazy story, or it might sound real and very detailed about what you're supposed to do. And then they send you a check and want you to send someone else some of the money. That's when you know it's a scam for sure. But the sad thing is usually you've already given out your personal information. The big key to recognize it, besides doing your homework, to research anybody you're going to give your personal information to. If you can nip it in the bud there, that's best. But if you get stuck in it, you get that check, you'll notice the check is not from anybody related to what you thought you were doing. Like it's just from some out of the blue company or name or place. And that's a big red flag. So you want to make sure you run that down. If you're in doubt, run it down to a banker so they can look into it and explain the whole story to the banker so that they really look into it and you don't get stuck putting that check in your bank account, then sending out money, and then the check is bad and now your account gets closed and you get tagged as having overdrawn account and owe the bank money. That's just not the thing you want to happen right now.
That was something I experienced a lot as I used to provide a service for weddings. I used to DJ MC weddings, and people would contact. They find your information if you're putting it out there. You're advertising your services, and I guess it's the same kind of thing as a work at home scam. And then they would say, "Hey, could I also send you a check for double so you could pay my florist?" And we'll just send you a check for double. You keep what your whatever your quote was. Um, so it's basically just if anything seems too good to be true, or anything seems too easy, or even just a little fishy, uh, I get to work with you and talk to you often, and I like to. One thing I've gleaned from you specifically is just ask questions and do your homework before you commit to anything or give anybody any information that you wouldn't trust a stranger with, right?
Exactly. Exactly. The other really big trend right now that is always a scam, but it's really taking off right now is rental scams.
Mm.
So people are advertising properties online. And then again, people provide their personal information when they apply for the rental, send deposits, and poof, the person was a scammer. And the property may actually exist, it may even be vacant, but it doesn't belong to that person. So those real estate scams, which include rental scams, those should be reported to the county district attorney office. All the counties in California have district attorney offices that have real estate fraud units that specialize in working on those investigations. So that's where you'd report that one. But I have seen reports coming in from victims here in Oxnard with both the work from home and the rental scams.
And yeah, as you mentioned, the rental scam thing's not new. It's picking up now because of the COVID stuff. Used to get calls all the time in dispatch of that happening, or people being suspicious of it happening, which is great. Always have something checked out, or like we just said, do your homework before you send anybody money or give them your personal information. What are other red flags, other than something seeming too good to be true, or what are other red flags that you can think of off the top of your head that people should just keep in the back of their mind in order to identify something, or just to kind of be like, ding, that might not be legit?
Um, One thing to do is really interrogate the email address that you're corresponding with. A lot of the scams will actually change the email address. It'll start off as something that looks legit. And then the next thing you know, you're corresponding with this crazy email that's in another country. And you never notice the switch. So always, when you don't physically know the person or the business, look at that top email address on the top of the email. You have to either hover or click on the actual what shows up to uncover the actual email address, because a lot of times they'll shortcut it with a nickname, or you've already your email program has already put a nickname on it,
Hmm.
and that you're not seeing the whole email address. So the bad guys take advantage of that. So always look closely at the email address, whether you're an individual or a business, because the other big scam is targeting businesses, which is really sad right now. And so many businesses are struggling for the business email compromise. And that's where they impersonate email account from within the business to trick a bookkeeper, for example, or whoever holds the purse strings at the business, to send money for some order or some invoice or something, that the whole thing is fake, but they put a spin on it to make it seem such an emergency that it has to be done right now. The employees don't take the time to double check.
Mm.
So always interrogate the email and look for errors in the grammar and the spelling and the just it doesn't sound right as far as if you read it out loud. It's just like that's not the way people here in the US talk.
Yeah, that's a
Um,
big one.
yeah, it can be hard for people whose native language is not English. Um, but if you can read the email address, you'll catch on real quick if you look at the real email address. If it changed to another country, it's so easy to see.
Yeah, and we got a couple of questions here on the live Q&A on Facebook, and if you are watching, you have any questions for Detective Escalante, please put it in the chat here while we're here. Um, One thing I just wanted to mention was kind of just to piggyback on what you were saying about if something doesn't feel right, and um, a lot of like red flags for me at least when I was talking to people as a dispatcher was like people would say they ask me to send them gift cards, they ask me to wire money a specific way, and if it's something that doesn't seem like a legit business would be doing or something, if it seems odd to you in any way as a form of payment, that's definitely something to look into, right?
Oh, absolutely. Gift cards is a huge red flag. No, no legitimate government agency, utility, or most businesses are not going to be taking gift cards as payment. Um, Wiring funds for the businesses, sometimes that could be the way they do business if you're a large business. But you have to just slow down. Like right now with COVID-19, I feel like the pace of life is a little slower. So take your time on these things, really investigate and verify everything. Another big red flag is when they ask you to send money to a third party that is out of the blue you never even heard of, like my business associates or something like that. No, don't do that.
Yeah. Um, just anytime something seems like that's great advice. Slow down, ask questions, do a little investigating on your own. A lot of times you'll get right to the bottom of it. We do have a question from Javier Juarez. He says, since it seems like we're all going to go cashless, or at least that seems to be the trend. Do you think fraud with debit cards, credit cards is going to go up? And I'll just add on to that. How can people protect themselves? Just any good general tips to protect your plastic.
That's a really good question when we're talking about the current trends with COVID-19. I'll tell you, these fraudsters, they are working overtime now that they're all working at home. Probably they don't have their legit jobs to go to anymore. They are selling credit and debit card numbers like crazy on the dark websites. The federal agencies are working really hard right now to shut that down, but they're playing whack-a-mole. Every time they shut one down, another one pops up. And so we all have to assume all of our personal information is out there. It's been compromised. Our card information also is probably out there and been compromised. And just we're all just sort of waiting to see when our information is actually going to get used. So the thing to do is set alerts on your accounts. So you get a text message, an email, whenever there's a transaction. I set a $1 limit on my accounts. So I get a text message every time one of my cards is used. It's a little annoying at times, but it works. There's also the credit reports are free right now. So for people opening new accounts without your knowledge, or these weird collections bills popping up, meaning someone probably opened a utility or cable account maybe a year ago you didn't know about. Um, those credit reports right now are free. You can always get one a year for free, but during COVID, you can get them more frequently because they know that ID theft is going up, so they've made them free.
And um, just to kind of backtrack a little bit on people working from home, something you and I had talked about maybe like, oh gosh, end of March when all of this really hit and people started working from home a lot more. What are some ways that people can protect themselves security wise as they do business at home, as far as like web protection or um, just protecting any vital information that's coming into the house that wouldn't normally be there?
A really basic thing to do is put a password, a strong password on your Wi-Fi access. So you want to log into the software or service provider for your router at home and make sure you've changed the password from whatever the default was when it got set up, and put a strong password that you know. Um, Also, protect your passwords. Use some sort of an encryption software to store your password lists, or some of the products out there will actually populate your passwords for you on your sensitive logins. It's up to you how you want to manage that, but you do definitely want your operating systems to always be updated, because that's filling in patches where the bad guys can slip in some malware. So that's what those software updates are for. They're security patches. And the same thing for your antivirus programs. You want to keep those updated and make sure that none of your devices are susceptible to getting any malware installed.
And it looks like, time flies when we're having fun, and we just have a few minutes left here. Is there anything we haven't touched on yet that you want to either inform people of or remind them of, or anything else you want to go over, make sure we have time for?
Oh, just to follow up on the answer about keeping your debit and credit card accounts safe, be very cautious of what online purchases you make. Maybe only use one or two trusted places to do online purchases. When you start linking online accounts together, that's when I see people's account information being compromised and stolen, and just like tons of withdrawals out to a whole bunch of different names. I don't want to name any of these apps, but the less apps you put your credit card in, the better. And a good rule of thumb is to use a credit card, not a debit card, ever for any of that activity, and dedicate one credit card to that type of activity. And like I said, make sure you have an alert on it. You get a text message every time there's a charge. And maybe only use that credit card for that activity so that you're very on top of it.
Why use a credit card and not a debit card for stuff like that?
Well, the banks and credit unions have certain rules they follow, and you have to report fraud on your credit and debit cards as soon as possible, because they have these day time limits. If you don't report it within a certain number of days, they're not going to reimburse you, especially a debit cards are stricter. The rules are much stricter. But rule of thumb is 30 days. You better report it before 30 days is up, but I like 48 hours. The odds of getting reimbursed if you report it within 48 hours are much better. And if you let it go beyond 30 days, you may not get reimbursed at all.
That's great advice. And I used to be that person who just never checked, never went online and looked at the transactions. And then one day, years ago, somebody got my debit card info and was doing like $200 Home Depot, $200 Walmart, $200, and like I didn't know till the next day. And because they were spacing it out, they knew that what was the smart way to use it. And I learned from that experience to just check, take it. I love your recommendation of putting that $1 limit you say before you get a notification. I never even thought of it that way. But make sure you're checking. And I feel like banks have gotten a lot better at like blocking that and figuring out when that's happening. If your card's being used in a different state and you just bought lunch where you normally buy lunch. But I think that's really great advice that you gave about, making sure you know exactly with the technology that we have that can notify us when our card is being used. Why not take advantage of that?
Oh, absolutely. And the banks do have a lot of smart software out there to detect fraudulent transactions and try to stop them. But, they're not going to have a $1 limit. they're going to, they're going to be like, oh, you have a $5,000 charge pending from Best Buy across the country. Okay, that one, they're going to catch it.
Right.
But when they're doing those little charges, especially if they start doing like every couple days some kind of automated little charge, that is going to add up,
Hmm.
and it's going to maybe take you a while to catch it. So stay on top of your accounts. You can use your phones to look at the statements and what's pending all the time, but that takes some time. So getting the alerts might be easier.
Sure. All right. Well, I think we've hit our time here. Is there any last messages you want to get out there tonight?
Well, since we were talking about the credit card fraud and all the reports people make, um, just remember I'm here in Oxnard PD. I'm one detective. If the bad guys in Oxnard or Ventura County and the use of your account information occurred here, I'll probably catch them for you, especially if it's around $1,000 or more. But when we don't know where these people are, we kind of have to rely on the smart folks in the federal agencies who have the big computer databases to work on those very sophisticated crooks.
All right. All very valuable, awesome information, and I hope you'll join us again for another one of these sometime. Would you? Or did we scare you off?
Oh no, I'd love to come back. It feels like there's so much more to talk about, and I think people probably have more questions, but we don't have time to answer them all today.
Well, we got all the questions that were asked today, so we'll definitely have you back, and we'll try and maybe get more questions in advance for the next one, because yeah, this information is so valuable, and with everything going on in the world right now, we got to stay up on these new developing scams and frauds that are going on. So, thank you so much for your wisdom and experience and everything that you do for our city and for joining us, Detective Escalante.
You're welcome, and I'll see you next time.
All right. Thanks so much, Oxnard, for joining us here online, live on Facebook. We'll be back at you next week with another live Q&A session with someone else in our department. Just quickly before we go, I did want to update everyone about everybody who has been messaging us about the street sweeping and the street sweeping citations or warnings that are being issued, and just be sure to check. No citations should have been given out yet. So if you found something on your parked car on street sweeping day, and it doesn't say that it's just a warning on the bottom, be sure to call our traffic office. That would be a mistake. But if you did receive one of those, it's most likely a warning. So just be sure you read the fine print there. So thank you again so much, Oxnard. Stay safe out there, and we will talk to you soon.